This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
What do I remember? I remember having a good time.
High magic or low magic as a default?
Dael, James, myself were shown the new MCDM role-playing game.
First question Matt asked me was, did you miss the attack roll?
You played the system once, and it's cool, and it's neat, and it's new, and you get to think about it in different ways. Your 50th time playing it, you're still going to feel that way as you collect these D4s and make your little dice pool.
But we didn't talk about the negotiation system.
Not yet. I'm not ready.
It might not replace 5th edition, but do you think it might replace something like Pathfinder?
Well, I haven't read Strongholds and Followers, Dael,
Well,
so
maybe
I
you
came...
like it.
All that and more right now. Welcome to the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 podcast in all the planes. And today, my name's James Hake. Tomorrow might be something else. And with me is Ben Byrne, our real host, Dale Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, and Dante off camera. Who's
Oh, wow. Dante I never give Dante a shout out in the intro.
Yeah.
He thinks he's people.
You can tell I'm not used to this. And I want to start this show off with a quick question to you, Dale, about magic.
Ooh.
When you're building worlds, high magic or low magic as a default for your system?
I always give the same answer to this question, and it's such a cop-out answer, but it's also true. I am neither high magic nor low magic. I am pervasive magic.
Oh.
So it's a bizarre mixture of there being a lot of magic in everything, but access to magic being relatively low, or certainly access to the control of magic being relatively low.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to say vague magic.
Vague magic.
Yet evocative.
But evocative. Yeah,
Very
the
evocative.
Vaga as opposed to the evoker. There's both of them. What about you, James? What do you prefer? High magic, low magic?
Ooh.
Defaulted, sorry. The default settings kicked in.
Yeah. It's okay. I talked about Dante, so it's all of a sudden we're
Yeah, I'm like, oh, you are fired from the host position.
As a default for a system, man, I don't know. Dale's answer is really good. Can I steal that one? I like high magic generally as like a rule because more cool stuff tends to be the way I like to go for tabletop RPGs. It's kind of the approach I took for Ethereal Expanse, right? It's like we've got Grim Hollow here, which is, not low magic per se, but the magic is a little bit dangerous, and
Sure.
you kind of want to play at lower levels where the magic is a little bit rarer and more mysterious. Whereas with Ethereal Expanse, we're like, yeah, the ocean's made of magic. Just go for it. Everything's magic in here. And it might be dangerous. It might not be all consuming, but it is always all around you and you're always going to be feeling it.
Gotcha. Shawn, what about you? What's your preference?
If you're talking about it as a setting, I prefer to start with low magic because 5e players are going to bring their own magic to the game. And I've rarely had a campaign that failed because of too little magic, where I've had lots of campaigns self-combust because of too much magic. So in that sense, if it's a 5e setting, start low and then I feel like there should be the lowest common denominator, but it's like the least available magic is the LAM. I follow the LAM principle, the least available magic. But if you're creating your own system, then you have to tailor it, as Dale says, to what you're trying to show in the game and tailor it from there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, 5e, I'm pretty sure everybody knows my preference on this. And I don't think 5e, at least at the early levels, is as difficult to make the world feel low magic as the system's reputation has it, because you just don't have a cleric in the church. When you go into town at low levels, you just can't be revived if you die. And that makes the party cleric feel like a prophet because they do have that power. That's what makes them unique. And there are higher level stat blocks that help you kind of, as the party grow in level, that help you deal with their abundance of magic. But it's not as difficult, I think, to make 5e feel lower magic at the earlier levels than its reputation kind of suggests.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing, right? Because I think part of it comes down to the DM having to really play around the fact that, if you're trying to be like, here's my setting that is largely human or whatever, and your player party come in and it's like a tiefling, a gnome, a dragonborn, and you're like, okay, how do I make that feel like it is special rather than happenstance, And there is kind of an art form to that. And the same with, of course, magic, like you're saying, if you have a party that is full of spellcasters, how do you make it feel like the world is still devoid of magic? But I think you're right. I think there's definitely ways to play around that and still make it feel low magic.
Yeah, for sure. I want to get into this topic more, but I think the chat are dying for us to talk about the weekend.
Yeah.
I just quickly want to say, folks were right. We did say last week that we were going to put our PAX panel up. And if you are listening to this, either live or recorded, and you were like, where's the PAX panel? Because I had a few people say that they were going to miss it, but I said, don't worry, there's a recording. There was a problem with the audio of that. Was one reason we decided to do a normal Lorecast this week. Dante's done an incredibly good job of restoring that audio.
He's worked so hard.
Yeah, he has. And the final product is
That's why he gets the intro
good.
This week. Little cheat.
So that will materialize for folks that either weren't at PAX or they missed the panel. We will have that go up at some point for everybody to be able to access. But also a lot of news happened this past week. I don't know if we're going to get time for listener emails. I don't know if we're going to get time for any other topics.
We're going to get time for all the news.
Yeah, I know. Speaking of news, Dael, James, myself, were shown by Roman, one of the MCDM playtesters, the new MCDM role-playing game. I still have my character sheet. Well, I shouldn't hold that in front of my face for the microphone. I still have my character sheet. I have all my notes here. I'm ready to talk about this. Dael
I left
Kingsmill.
my notes in the other room. I did bring them with me, but I left them in the other room, so we'll see how much I remember.
Right. Well, look, I was going to say it's perfectly fine to go grab them, but if you want the memory test, let's do the memory test.
Let's do the memory test.
What do you remember?
What do I remember? I remember having a good time. I got to play the Shadow, which is not only part of the playtest, but a new part of the playtest, which was very exciting. I was a Woad Elf Shadow, which is kind of the MCDM rogue. Which was a great vibe for me. I just slapped the name Lavellis on top of that sheet and went with it. And what a good time. I have such a soft spot in my heart for rogues. I think it's my go-to class. And so getting to try that out as sort of my first entry point to MCDM, what a blast.
James, what were you playing? Were you the Elementalist?
I played the Reaver, who is...
Right. I had Barbarian in our notes because I couldn't remember the name of it.
Formerly known as the Fury,
right.
Which we learned. It has a resource called Fury, so we'd be spending Fury's Fury all the time. No, they renamed it to Reaver.
Yeah.
Analogous to the Barbarian, kind of a all offense, no defense warrior who is using powers to bash people around the arena and like sunder their defenses and generally just kind of be a wild combatant.
I played the Tactician, which is the fighter kind of class, but very battle master feeling in terms of things that could apply special penalties to enemies when you hit them. There was a lot of statuses in this game. I found a lot of like, you can make an attack and this weapon now, this victim, for want of a better word, now has bleeding applied to it or dazed or stunned, or some sort of effect. Those effects, my words, not necessarily the game's for the record. But it was fun. It felt like the Battle Master. It felt tactical. So tick on one of their keywords. And generally I enjoyed it. And going into tactical to kind of talk about the combat, the way initiative worked, I thought was very interesting. It was quite similar from what Dael had described as popcorn initiative in previous episodes of the Lorecast, where basically one player rolled initiative against the GM, which I believe was just a D6 roll. There was no modifier added to that. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't think so. I think at one point I added a boon to it, but I don't know whether that's raw or whether that was rule of cool.
Right, gotcha. Mm-hmm. And then if let's say the players win, they get to choose who among them goes first, and then the enemy goes, and then The players then get to choose who goes next. So it's a back and forth. It's not purely choosing who goes first so the players can all group up together. There's a back and forth. So you have to, set up your strategy and your plan knowing that it might be interfered with by the enemy in between turns. And I honestly, for the first time experiencing that style of initiative, I could see how the tactical really came into it, because a moment that felt great for me. It was the tiniest quick moment, but it came to me. It was I think it was before my turn. We were discussing who would go, and Dael was next to an enemy, so would get an attack of opportunity. They might call it something different in the game. She could sacrifice movement to be able to, I think it's like you can move half as a disengage functionally. So sacrifice half your movement, get away without any attacks of opportunity. But I could run up, hit the enemy, and then daze them. I believe it was the dazed condition. I could look down at my sheet, but I don't want to ruffle it for audio. I believe it was the dazed condition, which meant that they couldn't take reactions, which then allowed Dael's character to move away and go and help someone else. And we got to make that choice about what order we went in, and that felt really tactical and really
tactical,
cool.
Really cool. And it really did have the, like, I think particularly the shadow had this kind of like move around the battlefield and do different things kind of feel to it. So it was nice seeing those tactics like actually have an impact on being able to like go and help out our other tactician who is a player whose name will come to me in a minute.
You're going to do better than me. I apologize to the other three people we had at the table.
Because I left my notes in the other room. It's out there.
Dale.
Sam. Thank you, Roman.
Well, speaking of Popcorn Initiative, this is just another opportunity for me to talk about Lancer, my favorite tactical RPG that isn't D&D at the moment.
Right, sure.
Which I frequently felt had a lot of similarities to what we played at the table there. Most acutely felt in the initiative system, which is basically the same, though this one has that die at the beginning. In Lancer, it's just players go first and then their foes start going second. Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting, very tactical system that it comes at the cost of needing to kind of think about, well, okay, wait, hold on. It costs time in the shuffle of play. And that might be real world time. Yeah. And that might be kind of the biggest, pro and con situation that the MCDM RPG has to deal with, which is how are you going to reconcile the fast, splashy action of their cinematic goal with the thoughtful, considered, deliberative nature of their tactical goal.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think in terms of their 4 keywords, I can never remember what the third one is, but fantasy, I don't think we even really need to talk about that.
Easy.
There were kobolds, there were swords, there was teleporting, tick.
And also the fantasy of like, what do you want to feel like as a rogue? I want to feel like I'm, disappearing into the shadows and moving around and stabbing people in the back. And yeah, dick.
Gotcha. The tactical and cinematic is something I really want to talk about. I want to bring it up kind of last because I want to deep dive into. I want to deep dive into the. I'll get through this. The negotiation.
Is this bit worth
system.
Is this bit worth it?
This bit is 100% worth it for the negotiation system. I probably won't say much during that segment, but people can gauge my thoughts. But I want to give a little bit more of an overview. Somebody in the chat mentioned, what is the Venn diagram between MCDM patrons and Lorecast listeners? And it's a very good point because Shawn might be sitting here right now going, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. What is that? For those that are listening to this on audio, Shawn just rubbed his face with his mug for some reason.
It was a D&D mug.
It's cool. Yes, it is a D&D mug as well.
So let's give a bit of a broader overview, I think, just on the core combat mechanics, which were 2 things came to mind. First, your turn is broken, and correct me if I misremember any of this, your turn is broken into 1 action and 1 maneuver. And your action is typically to attack, and your maneuvers can be a little bit more varied based on what class you're playing.
But usually will include movement.
Yes, because movement's not a separate thing,
Yeah.
is my understanding. You can also, you have a lot of stratagems they're referred to, which are the special things that your class can do.
Now that's for the tactician. For the Reaver, I had onslaughts that could use my action.
And what was the shadows?
I don't remember what they were called, but they were sick as hell.
Okay.
I don't know, stabby things. I gotta go get my notes. I'll be back in a second.
Okay, that's fine. Some of these things could be used costing a maneuver, and some of them could be used, as part of an attack. So applying a condition as part of an attack, and it would cost for me focus, which was kind of my currency. There's a currency that's unique to each class as well. It was Fury for the Reaver, thank you. It was Focus for the Tactician. It was Doom for the Shadow. I can't remember what it was for the Elementalist. Concentration, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then there is a fifth class that I can't remember what it was called either, but it was kind of like a cleric.
The Conduit.
Right, okay, there you go. And so the other kind of thing that's core, I think, to the system is this idea that it's not that you can never miss. You can miss attacks, but something always happens in theory. And so when you roll to attack, you roll 2d6, you add them together with any modifiers that you might have, and you're trying to get above your opponent's armor class, and how much you beat the armor class by is largely how much damage you do.
Yeah.
And so it's very elegant because there's just one roll. It's like, all right, I'm making an attack, blam, there's that attack. And I know the damage, everything's all in one roll.
Yeah. And the first question Matt asked me was, did you miss the attack roll? And my answer is, I didn't even notice that we weren't making attack rolls for a solid little while there. I was, if anything, it felt like we weren't making damage rolls, but I didn't miss that because the damage was still happening and I was still feeling like buzzed about my high attack roll, which is kind of neat because it also sort of eliminates that thing of rolling a really like good attack roll, like you get a natural 19 on the die or something and then you roll minimum damage.
Sure.
So, I liked it.
If you don't beat your enemy's armor class, every creature has a counter damage, and that counter damage is different depending on whether it's melee or ranged. For the tactician, I'm just looking at my character sheet. Melee, if someone runs up in melee and hits me, I can, or they don't hit me, I should say, they roll and they miss, then I do 5 damage back to them automatically. I don't have to roll for that. That automatically gets applied. If at range, someone throws an arrow at me, I catch it out of midair and throw it back at them for 3 damage. I don't know. They don't really explain
I will say, in a weird way, I did miss rolling for that.
Right,
in a very weird way, because it's nice doing like a set amount of damage, but every time I got to make like a counterattack, part of me was like, oh, cool, now I get to do a thing, but you don't actually like do a thing. Does that make sense? Like,
I think there are some actions or maneuvers or something that allow you to do a thing, but I don't think they ever came up.
I kept glancing at my sheet looking for like a reaction or counterattack.
Because I remember there being things where it's like if you hit with this attack, you can take another action even if it's not your turn. Right. And that can allow for some funky off-turn handling.
That's cool. I love off-turn. I know it. I know it creates mess. I know it takes time, but I just love it. Also, by the way, I went to get my notes and I found these notes, but not my character sheet. So that's in my Airbnb somewhere.
that belongs to someone else now.
All I know is that I had Doom and I liked it.
The other, sorry, actually, let me put this in order a little bit. So the next thing just to quickly mention is that ability checks are very similar, where you roll 2d6 and then you add them together with a modifier or a score, it's referred to, for might, agility, endurance, reason, and intuition and presence, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, under different names. And then you could have skill proficiencies, which add +1s to those. So it's it's not the same as 5th edition. It doesn't feel the same as 5th edition, but it is very
it's in the same
translated.
Vein. It's intuitive if you are familiar with.
I do want to say, I think my favorite part of the playtest is the fundamental use of 2d6 plus some stuff. I've been thinking a lot about the way dice mechanics work and like comparing rolls to a target number. And while I was getting a little bit, I was trying to understand what a high target number versus what a low target number was in
What's
the system.
What's the DC 10?
Right, because your max roll is a 12 on the dice instead of a 20 on the dice. So I'm like, well, where am I going with this? But just having the 2d6 was really nice because it was like a compromise between using a 3d6 system and a d20 system.
Sure.
Which, for example, d20, right, every single result of 1 through 20 has a 5% chance of happening, which makes it very random. Whereas 3d6 has a bell curve where a roll of like 9, 10, and 11 have a very large chance of happening, and a roll of 3 or 18 have a sub 1% chance of happening with every roll. And I hear a lot of people talk a big game about 3d6, especially for like grittier, darker games, like Green Ronin's Dragon Age system and the Age system that they spun off of it uses 3d6. And I don't like that dice system because it means that the wild and woolly cool stuff basically never happens. Sure. Whereas I felt like, a reasonable amount of time, we rolled either an 11 or a 12 on the dice. A critical happened in our game. And I was like, hey, neat. Mm. But it didn't feel like there was the inconsistency of failing stuff that we should be good at happening with nearly the frequency that it happens in a D20 system.
Oh man, the thing that I really liked was that as you are adding boons to your roll, so you've got your 2d6 and then someone is like, and I'm giving you this bonus and I'm giving you this bonus. And so you're adding these D4s to your thing. And it felt a little bit like collecting dice for a fireball or a smite, right? Like you're shopping around everyone else's. Can I have, yeah, cool. And you just make this little pool to roll, which was kind of, I like the fact that it felt a little bit like that sort of candy shop quality.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask the important question now.
Yes.
Which is, you played the system once and it's cool and it's neat and it's new and you get to think about it in different ways. Your 50th time playing it, you're still going to feel that way as you collect these D4s and make your little dice pool.
No, this is a big criticism or not even a criticism, but a big thought that I have of it. And when people came and asked me, they're like, oh, well, how was the MCDM game? I said, it's not better than 5th edition. From one game, I don't think it's worse than 5th edition. Largely, it's doing a lot of the same things that 5th edition does. But one of the things that I did find incredibly fiddly was, and again, like this might both improve and lack as you play this game more, because it'll improve as you get better at knowing what your character can do and quickly slamming on benefits, right? Rather than needing to read your sheet. At the same time, there's a lot of little benefits and little things and little like, I add this to the roll, I add this to the roll that kind of, interrupts the flow that, is trying to serve that tactical side of things. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of conditions and a lot of things are being handled by conditions. So like being on fire is now a condition as opposed to 5e will usually have that as part of the description of the thing that sets you on fire. And so I'm wondering if like the rulebook's just going to have like, 2 or 3 page double spreads of, single or double paragraph things that you have to read through that keep getting stacked on. Mm-hmm. So I think there is definitely, for me, this is not going to replace 5th edition from my impression of it so far at all. I think it's a fun game to play with a very tactical group, but I think that that's a good observation, Shawn, that I'm not sure how it would play after the 50th time, kind of playing it for that very reason.
When I haven't played it, I may have gotten a peek at the playtest documents, maybe. But one of the things of 4th edition was when we first started showing it off at conventions, it was exhausting in a good way to play. People felt like they were playing high-level D&D at first level. And it was wonderful, and they were cheering and sweating, and it just felt so dramatic and great. And I said, this is just first level. Imagine what it will be at higher levels, without realizing that what I was saying actually wasn't going to be a benefit.
Yeah.
What I was saying was, imagine how much cooler it's going to be. It wasn't cooler at higher levels. It was just slower at higher levels.
Mhm.
And so when I see this, without having played it, without knowing anything more about it, that's my fear. And maybe they're going to design a way around that. I trust the folks there to do that. I just wonder if that's going to be on their radar.
We'll talk, because I think we might have a hookup for you to play this game sooner rather than later, and you know, it would be great for you to kind of come in a week later and give your
Guns
thoughts
a-blazing.
specifically about it as well. Because I'm also just imagining the 4th edition playtest now as like the rave scene out of the Matrix Reloaded. Everybody's like sweating and rolling dice, and there's just like sweat being, flying through the air.
But we didn't talk about the negotiation system.
Not yet. I'm not ready. I want to touch one thing before we get to the negotiation system.
Oh, this is actually real quick as well. Horrible Cabbage in chat does say it might not replace 5th edition, but do you think it might replace something like Pathfinder, which is the second place, which is supposedly more tactical? And I do wonder if there is room for it to, in my heart, replace something like Pathfinder.
I'd be very curious, because Pathfinder and its publisher Paizo is really big, and MCDM is not that big.
Sure.
And so, like, institutionally, would that cause a shift?
I don't know. This doesn't seem like this character sheet. And for the record, Roman did say that the characters we were playing, it said level 1 on the sheet, but he went to pains to kind of say, like, this
stuff checked in.
This could be more of a level 3 character. I said it makes zero difference to me what level this character is. You could tell me it's level 20 and I'd believe you. Like, I don't know. I have no context for it.
I wouldn't.
Well, it depends on the sort of game they're trying to design, I suppose. But what's lost in the simplicity of like adding all these extra little bonuses that go on and on and on is gained a little bit in the fact that there's a single roll for attack and damage.
Yeah.
So I think that it can feel very smooth in that capacity. But I haven't played Pathfinder to know if it scratches quite the same itch. Pathfinder is so customizable.
I really haven't played Pathfinder
That's true.
too.
That's very, very true. And that was a big draw card for me with Pathfinder, was the really granular kind of customizing. Yeah.
Just before we get to the negotiation system, the one other thing I really liked about this was how your focus, fury, doom, concentration recharged kind of actively.
Yes.
So you weren't spending spell slots and then needing a rest. You could get back to full just by playing the game.
And I don't know whether we talked about this when I was out of the room, but they recharge using different things, which really plays into the fantasy. So like for the shadow, you recharge when enemies die. And that's really cool because it encouraged a certain kind of play where I'm looking for like, who are the weak links? Who can I shank in the shadows so that I get more doom, so that I can work up towards killing someone big?
Yeah, you're like a lion looking for the gazelle with a broken leg the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas the Reaver just gets fury by hitting stuff. I'm using a normal attack. I'm like, boom, that's another fury. Boom, that's another fury. I don't know if any of the rest of the characters had something like this, but one of my kind of pain points for the Reaver was that in addition to being a currency to spend to do my bigger onslaughts in combat, Fury also gave me some bonuses, some static bonuses to rolls. It was something like I gained 1 speed and a +1 on attacks for every 2 Fury I had.
Right.
And in addition to just being kind of fiddly and forgettable, I would often I didn't know I had 4 Fury. I wasn't thinking about it. So actually 2 more damage, or actually I could have gotten to that guy. It's also just like, well, is it an interesting tactical decision to hoard my fury so that I get the passive bonus, or spend it to get a big attack? Really, I would rather just be getting my big attacks basically all the time. I don't want to not have my cool attacks. That's what they're there for, you know?
Well, I think the decision is kind of like, when do you, like, it's an ebb and flow, right? Which is what I like about it. For a paladin, you've got to choose when to Divine Smite, and then that spell slot's gone, right? Whereas you might be hoarding Fury, but then when you want to hit the big thing, you go up and smack it, and then your Fury can come back.
I wonder if it's a flavor clash, right? Because the Fury, it feels like you should just be hitting, you should be swinging big every time. Whereas if it was something like Doom Points give me extra movement, then I would have an interesting choice. Do I spend these Doom Points to like do a big like knife in the back, or do I keep some of my Doom Points so that I can move around the battlefield more? That feels like it fits more with something like the Shadow than it does with the Fury, where it feels like, I keep calling it the Fury. I do like the name Fury. I understand why they changed it to Reaver, but I do like the name Fury. So
the Fury should have Reaver points is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
All right. James Intricasso, take that design note. We're swapping them.
Dael, what you're saying is making me think of something that Jeremy Crawford said in this week's Unearthed Arcana video, which I maybe we'll get to later, I hope, and is essentially that when it comes to, he was talking about the monk in this point and their discipline points. It is problematic towards your design when you have two limiting factors on your actions. Sure. This isn't exactly what we're talking about here, but it feels in the same vein, because like some monk abilities in the playtest are both like, you can use this 3 times a day, and also it costs discipline points to use, and that didn't feel right to me. In this, it's kind of in the same family of problem where it's like, you need to be using discipline points to do this thing that your class is supposed to do, but you also need to be not spending your discipline points in order to do this thing your class wants to do. And it's like, I don't know how to rectify that in my mind.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, for me, I enjoy the tactical, for the tactician specifically, I enjoyed the tactical ebb and flow. I didn't get to use it a lot over the course of the 3-4 hour playtest, but I can see where they're going with that decision making. And with the fiddliness of the system, I literally just thought this now. I was looking at my character sheet, and I remember thinking this at the time, this would make a great video game where all of the fiddliness of applying conditions and things, the game kind of takes care of for you, instead of needing to have a monster with like 3 hoops hanging off it at any given time.
It'd be like Darkest Dungeon if I liked Darkest Dungeon.
Shawn, do you have, like, here, I hope we're painting a clear enough picture for yourself and others that haven't seen it. Do you have any questions or things that you're curious about?
No. No, I'm interested. I've been trying to avoid reading about this playtest.
Oh, no, we spoiled him again.
No. Because I don't want it to color things I'm designing.
Right.
But now I want to play it. Now I have all the game design questions going on in my head. You're talking about these things, and I'm reminded of the 4th edition assassin, who could put shadows on creatures that it attacked and then spend those shadows to do things, which I thought was an interesting design because it was limited to just that class, and it would speak to a certain kind of player who would be up to keeping track of those things and spending those things and fiddling with those things to make the game better for them, whereas it might not fit for every class. So I would love to see classes that were different and that played with those levels of fiddliness to the joy of the player, while another player could just hit things really hard with its sword.
Yeah, from what we've seen so far, every class, like, there's no champion fighter. From what we've seen so far, every class has a high level of that, which is, from what I understand, what they're designing for, Sure. But if you want that roll to hit, roll to wound, and then drink a cola and eat some chips, maybe play Daggerheart. I don't know.
And it is worth noting as well that, like, for example, I loved the flavor of the Shadow, but having said that, as the rogue equivalent, it does have some sort of inherently magical qualities to it.
Yes, it's very specific.
Worth pointing out, because I'm also someone who looks at the Ranger and is like, why are we making this inherently magical, right? So I fully grasp that there are people out there for whom these flavors of those things, it's not going to be the flavor that they want. And when we are talking about a game that at least currently in this stage of playtesting, is not as customizable as something like Pathfinder, where you can literally be like, I'm going to perfectly craft this person who is the 1 part sorcerer and 3 parts barbarian, and like you can like really carefully construct the exact kind of character that you have in your head to match this background that you've invented. And this is kind of the flip side on that. It's high flavor and mechanics that really feed into that flavor. But if it's not the flavor you're looking for, where do you go?
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, we're out of time to talk about the negotiation system, so we're just going to move along.
We think that there's something to it, but it's this format, not yet.
It's a very cool sort of mechanicalized social interaction, kind of like this a mini debate team, UN negotiation with one other character.
All right, Mr. Aberration, we're going to sit down with our lawyers and
discuss your case.
That's what we said at some point when we were talking to Roman afterwards and figuring out our feedback. I was like, it felt like lawyers emailing each other with like contract negotiations.
It was a deposition.
There was a lot of fun stuff that came out of it, but I don't know. It's a first version, Yeah,
look,
some massaging.
Exactly.
I've actually been waiting, as much as I pretend I don't want to talk about it, I've been waiting all weekend to just trash this thing. What
do you mean we're out of time? You got to talk about it now. You can't. Playtest Bastions doesn't need this space.
I want to, I want to give a very strong caveat here, right? When I say trash this thing, I'm kidding. I don't mean to be overly negative on the design of this. Systemizing social encounters is never going to be what I consider cinematic. It is the complete opposite of cinematic for me. I systemize my social encounters in 5e almost like dialogue trees, where it's, but instead of choosing options, you're rolling dice to see which way the conversation goes, and then it continues, and then there might be another check. So there's a very loose system to it, but it's organic because it's conversation. You're
and because a lot of that system is on your side of the screen, right? Like I do the same.
Sure,
I have systemization, but I have it on my side of the screen because I do think scaffolding is really handy for players to be able to build off, particularly for role-playing encounters, because role-playing is scary and it makes you vulnerable and you have to act and it feels weird and your friends are watching, right? So I think that having a scaffolding, having a structure is a really good idea, and I do think that making some of that player-facing so that they have something to grab onto, some monkey bars, is a really good idea, but I think a lot of it could be DM-facing.
Can we describe what the structure of the negotiation system is before we get too deep into the weeds?
I'm going to try. Speaking of like lots of fiddly things, so you come up against a monster or an NPC, and they have a level of interest in helping you and a level of reluctance based on an inner conflict. There are also many topics that you can discuss, some of which are motivations for that character, some of which are pitfalls for that character. Now they have they have a level of interest. I can't even read what that word is. They also have patience. Patience runs out. Reluctance is separate from patience. There's also ethical or emotional concerns that you can appeal to, and enticements, which are an argument in the guise of a promise.
Right. There are two types of like actions you can take. There's the appeal and there's the enticement.
Indeed. Now you take these actions towards the end of a round or during a round, but a round starts with an argument that you're going to put to them, which is either an enticement or tapping into one of their motivations, I think. Which you can also gain insight into what some of these pitfalls or motivations could be. And then there's the end of the round where an offer is made, and the offers are split into yes, and I will give you the best, outcome of this. I'll give you extra things. Yes, no qualifiers. Yes, but there's a negative. No, but I'll give you something you want. Unqualified, no, and I'm going to kill your puppy as well. And
in the midst of all of this, which is a largely diceless, highly, verbal system, you can make dice rolls. I think they're like empathy rolls or something, using an empathy skill, to kind of get some insight into what these hitherto unknown motivations and pitfalls are, or to extend the patience timer. So that's where like the core dice system of the game injects itself into the system.
Absolutely. And you have to pick a representative to make these arguments after you all discuss it. At the end of a round, you might have scored, I can't remember exactly, I think it was interest. Once you score enough interest, then they might want to help you. qualified by their reluctance, but you all need to get together, huddle, and make an offer to them. And then after that round is over, you all huddle again and discuss, and then pick a new representative to make that argument.
The lawyers sending emails.
Are you lost in the nouns yet, Shawn? Because there's a lot of, or verbs, I should say. There's a lot of verbs and nouns in this overly complex
and
system.
Adjectives.
And the words.
I think of skill challenges from 4th edition, and people were like, oh, this was a good idea, but it didn't go far enough. This sounds like it's a good idea, but it was gone way too far.
Sure.
Huh.
Yeah, that's kind of what a lot this sheet of notes that I have is all negotiation. And that's kind of what my notes amount to. I'm like, I feel like this could be simplified.
Yeah.
I feel like we could have like half or even less the amount of things that we're measuring, and it would still work. Someone does say, Drek Fletch in chat says, is negotiating like riddling with dragons? That is kind of the vibe.
Yeah, you could use it.
But I need you to, there is a certain level of bureaucracy attached to it as well.
Yeah. It was also unclear to me, like, and Roman did say that you can end a negotiation early if you want to, if you think you're going to get from the NPC or the monster what you need without trying to necessarily get the best score that you could. But you can also keep the negotiation going for as long as they have patience as you know, you have points of patience that slowly pip down. As long as they still have patience to listen to you, you can continue the negotiation if you think you can get more and more out of it, which is, it's very tactical and fun, or I can see how it could be fun. But there is the option to kind of end early, which I liked, because as we were sitting there going through this, I had enough of it very quickly. And I wanted to move on.
My patience ticked out.
Yeah.
Hey, there were definitely fun bits, especially in the discussion of like, okay, so what are we gonna appeal to? What if we say this? You know, there was a lot of fun in that, but it kind of ebbed and flowed in and out of the fun. And then I was building a tower of dice.
Yeah. Dice Tower City is the negotiation system.
I wonder if it would be cool. I didn't have this out of the playtest, but I wonder if it would be cool if ending the negotiation early with some patience left over would grant you a small but substantial boost to your overall score. Right? Because like you don't want to wear everyone's patience thin anyway, but also you. Playtesting is interesting. We're being very hard on the system, but like that's a good playtest data, no matter whether it was good or bad, because you learn something very much about how players thought this went.
To be fair, you know, I'm playing up my revulsion of this system for comedic effect, but it was a first draft of this system. And I believe they may be, they're aware that they probably need to pare it back. But
I think it was literally the first time that the negotiation system was being at least externally playtested, I think. Right.
Yes.
If I have that right.
But hey, like, you know, for people that are more mechanically minded, for folks who enjoy the tactical of role-playing games and not so much the, actorliness of role-playing games, the role-playing, they might love this, you know, and really get into it.
First time this version was tested externally. Thank you, Roman.
But yes, we are. There is more news to move on to. So, speaking of things that we're excited about, just a quick reminder to folks: Aberration, Ghostfire Gaming's first board game, is still on Game Found. There'll be links. Oh man, I put a link somewhere, but now I'm freaking out.
We got to see it at the weekend. What was it called? PAX.
PAX, that's where we were, yeah. We wanted to run it. We had copies there to run Aberration, and they were in transit to us. So we sadly weren't able to. Thank you. I don't think you've been on while it's been live, James, because you've been away traveling for a little bit. But are you a board game person? Do you enjoy a good?
Yeah, I like board games. In fact, I like Peter Lee board games. Lords of Waterdeep is one of my favorites.
Good. Yeah. Well, then you will like Aberration.
Hell yeah.
On Game Found. Go check it out. I'm sure someone will save me with a link pretty soon in the Twitch chat, or it'll be down there or over there or somewhere. If you're watching this on YouTube. Speaking of things that I know Shawn's excited by, Shawn, you ever feel like you need a little
It's one of
need a little
these.
scent in your life. You need a little. You want to freshen yourself up a little and maybe oil that beard.
People tell me I should be doing that. Yes. Why, Ben? Why? Why are you asking?
Well, have I got a product for you? Because you love D&D and you love beards, or the having of such. Beard Sorcery is releasing an officially licensed D&D Beard oil. I saw this.
No longer will you have to rub your beard with your mug.
Yeah, get that coffee smell out of that beard and replace it with Displacer Beast, a stealthy mix of juniper berries, clean citrus, cedar, and spices. A sporty blend for the stealthy but athletic man or person. Am I getting you with Displacer Beast?
Did you say cedar or sitter? Like Irish sitter,
Look,
like the dog? I
I'm gonna be honest. I have no idea how that word's supposed to be pronounced. I almost said Kedar or something like that.
Oh, that would have been very wrong.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Look, that one doesn't seem to be.
Benjamin,
All right,
Benjamin,
Dael, I don't need your look of
It's
incredulousness.
a tree.
Yeah, okay. It doesn't seem the
You know
Displacer
what?
Beast.
No, it's perfectly legit for people to learn words by reading. I take it back.
Thank you. Thank you. James, what about Mighty Owlbear? A spicy, crisp, and fierce, like yourself. This blend encapsulates the wild, tangled forests where mythical, mighty owlbears lurk.
I love this description because it describes nothing about the way it smells as opposed to the other one.
Fair. Yeah, I have nothing else to say on this. I saw this on the D&D Instagram. I chuckled to myself. I thought, I'm throwing this on the Lorecast run sheet, and that was all.
It makes me think of when they just threw a mimic on a coffee grounds.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. Shawn got
I
it.
wish I smelled like owlbear, he said.
Yeah, what
with-
does owlbear really smell like?
Some trepidation. with a small bit of curiosity.
Dael, what do baby owlbear tears smell like?
Okay.
You'd know that.
Okay. Look, I thought it had a speech bubble. I thought I could talk to the mother owlbear. I thought it was going to be fine, and it wasn't fine. And now that owlbear is an orphan and is eating its parents. I don't think this is on me.
But it smells good.
But it smells good.
That's why we needed the owlbear for its scent glands. That's how they make the beard oil. Speaking of MCDM, playtest packet number 8 has come out from Wizards of the Coast, which includes the Bastion system, where you have strongholds and may even attract some followers. I haven't read it. Shawn, I'm hoping you can save us on this one.
I will do my best. I did read most of it, and I have many questions. But I think what I'm assuming is Wizards of the Coast has seen other companies make, or other developers or other designers, including in their own books, Acquisitions Incorporated franchise rules, make these strongholds, and they're testing to see if DMs want them and players want them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, even though this is quite long at 21 pages of content, it's a what's it called? A trial balloon. They're sending it out there to see if people are interested. It is perfectly fine. I don't know how it's going to interact with downtime, because to me, some of this stuff does exactly the same thing that a downtime session would do. But it's a step in the direction of seeing what people might like. I would add that for Oracle of War, which is an Eberron campaign that Will Doyle and I and a few other people worked on, we had something called salvage bases. You can find this, I believe, on the DM's Guild. And those salvage bases were built in a very similar way to how Bastions here are built, including things that you could only add at a certain tier of play and get a benefit from. These bastions, if you set up a bastion, you get from it Bastion points as it goes. And then you can spend those Bastion points to do specific things depending on the types of locations that you put in your Bastion stronghold. So if you put a garden in, you can reap the herbs to make potions with. Or if you have an armory, you can do certain things with it. The actual game mechanics of it are still a little loose and need to be tweaked. It says that you should, for each level of character you should run one of these Bastion rounds 6 or 7 times, but each round is supposed to cover a week. So that's saying that between levels, as you're adventuring, you should have at least 6 or 7 weeks. Now, later it does say you can expand or contract these as you would based on your campaign, but it's just, that in itself caught my interest. Are they saying that campaigns should, each level should be about 2 months of play in game? Because that's new. That's something they've never set forward before, even though me, as the person who wants to know how long should my in-game campaign be, was waiting for that information. I didn't get it until right here in this document. So it's a playtest. That's all I have to say. We'll see how it goes.
It very much, it feels like a lot of really cool ideas that are in playtest, which is, good. That's a good sign for it. It's also the first time I've looked at one of these playtest things and really just gone, this belongs in the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is the first time I've been like, this is what that book is for. This stuff right here. And I hope that it makes it. I think whoever has done this design has a lot of really cool ideas. I want to know who it is so I can follow through and check out their other stuff, because it does scratch a lot of itches for me, because as Pixel they DM in chat has mentioned, the MCDM Strongholds and Followers is quite sort of detailed in a lot of ways. And this also is very detailed in a lot of ways, but sits a little bit closer to the sort of Skyrimian, Simsy kind of Bastion system that I do like. I've talked about it in videos before. Maybe they wrote this just for me. There are definitely bits that I think need some ironing out. Things like, I like the idea of like, okay, you get your Bastion, because like it's exciting. You get to the end of a session and they go, you've cleared out all the kobolds from the lightning tower, and now you have a base that you can use if you want, right? And they say you get 2 basic facilities and 2 special facilities automatically. And I do think it's interesting that you've got like this separate thing where it's talking about the Bastion map, and it says you can automatically include corridors, closets, doors and windows. But you do have to choose from the list of basic facilities, which don't have any real mechanical benefits, but bedroom, kitchen, all are included in their washroom. And so part of me I think it's very, very funny. The idea that it's like, well, if you want 2 bedrooms, you can't have a kitchen. Tough luck. Especially because they're basically saying in here that the idea is that they don't have a mechanical benefit like the special facilities do, but there's room for sort of role play opportunities that are specific to a location. I think if you're going to do that, then the basic facility, you should include like bedrooms and kitchens in the automatic stuff and make these interesting, make it like a ballroom, or I don't know, a rose garden, something that is flavorful, but not necessarily something that could give you some kind of mechanical boost. I think is, if you're going to do it this way, I would expect it to look a little bit more like that. But then, on top of that, you've got, all these special facilities that I think are very, very cool. The idea that, you've got your your smithy. If you decide to build a smithy, you get a boost from that. I really love that stuff. But like Shawn said, it does have this interesting thing, how it interacts with downtime, because I want bastions or strongholds or whatever you're going to call them, your home base. I want that mechanically to be about encouraging downtime play. Because I think that a lot of games, a lot of campaigns struggle to encourage downtime activity because it doesn't have structure, it doesn't have mechanical benefits. And so I like for this concept to be the place where you encourage that. You go to your home base because going to your home base gives you X mechanical benefit. And then while you're there, it's like, okay, so tell us about what you were studying in your observatory that led to this bonus. I do think there are also things like you can spend Bastion points to get magic items. And I was really excited about that idea at first, but then it seemed to become just fairly run-of-the-mill. It was just like, this is a thing that always happens. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
I would like it to be more exciting. I'll point out the coolest thing in here, in my opinion, is that there are Bastion events that happen. And it's not, a lot of them are not very detailed. It's like, I don't know, you can be attacked and it just sort of says, you get attacked by someone, I don't know, figure it out. Or there's an extraordinary opportunity, figure out with your DM who it might be, what are they offering? But when you get to honored guests, they have this cool little narrative table, right? They're like, a band of mercenaries arrives at the gate and they can add extra defense to your thing. And it becomes this little story opportunity. And it's a little table that you roll on. Who is the honored guest? A dragon comes and lands on your fort. And if you don't tick it off, you might be able to convince a dragon to stay and defend your fort, which again is something that appears in Strongholds and Followers by MCDM. I mean, they're building on the same groundwork of old school D&D stuff.
Same concept.
But, yeah. But it's just wild to me that you've got this really cool narrative prompt here that feels like it plays into the downtime, feels like it plays into what they're going for with Bastions, but they haven't done that with the other things. And I think that is the strongest thing in here, and I want to see more of that.
This is the sort of stuff that, while there wasn't a lot of room to develop it mechanically, was at the heart of Troll Skull Alley in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is like, I wanted to make a character sheet for that house, right? There's a map for the house, and I wanted to make a character sheet for it, and it didn't quite
I think they're going to have to make a character sheet for Bastions if they're going along these lines. Sorry, carry on.
I hope they do. I really want them to, because having a character sheet for your base is great.
Yeah, and well, you could, put a tavern in your Bastion, except you have to be, 9th level to do it?
Okay, it seems a little...
And a very wise game designer commented on this earlier to me, saying, how would it work in the Wizards of the Coast published adventures? Let's think about this. So first we had Tyranny of Dragons, where you're sort of traveling across the... that's not going to work very well because it's hard to get back to your home base. Well, let's Out of the Abyss. No, that's not going to work so well. How about Tomb of Annihilation? Well, no, because... okay, how about Descent into Avernus? Well, no. So you've got to find a way for it. Yes.
We have to find one. Is that?
No, I know one. I ran one. It's my favorite, least favorite, most favorite, unfavorite D&D adventure. It's Princes of the Apocalypse.
Yes.
Which is set in one sort of, valley. And you keep going back to Red Larch and you keep going out to these dungeons. Then you go back to Red Larch and go underneath the old dungeon, find a new dungeon. And that's very sort of old school D&D, which is the milieu that this system is drawn from in the first place.
Somebody pointed out in the chat, I apologize, I won't be able to scroll up and find it, but they were saying that a lot of these sorts of systems, when they're introduced to 5e, don't feel core. They feel like an added-on mini-game, and that's generally my feeling as well. The thing that attracts me to this system is I am someone who's struggled to do downtime, and because... as it was described, I think in Xanathar's, one of the suggestions was like, in downtime, you rob a magic item auction. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like downtime. How am I meant to extrapolate that? That sounds like the adventure. Like, is downtime just another name for different, like, lower stakes types of adventures? I think that this will help with that for GMs like myself who struggle with downtime. But I also think for it to make sense, your campaign has to kind of revolve around it in some capacity. Like I'm excited by the idea of, I've talked before about the best way to start a D&D campaign, in my opinion, or the best experiences that I have had is when the party is already a family in some capacity rather than strangers meeting in a tavern. They're part of a pirate ship. They're part of like a traveling caravan. They all grew up in the same village, even if they're not friends. All in MCDM
Strongholds and Followers, by the way.
Well, I haven't read Strongholds and Followers, Dael.
Well, maybe you like it.
Maybe I would. I don't know. To be honest, the way that folks describe it to be so mechanically intense is what scared me off. And that was kind of in the limited time that I had coming off of PAX.
Which is fair.
I looked at this playtest packet and I was like, not for me right now. Like I don't think I can penetrate this right now. But I think if you had a party and their background is they were all serfs or low lords or, people from different, social statuses who all lived in the same, heritaged manor or castle for whatever reason, or maybe like a wizard's tower if they're all critters from across the multiverse, someone's playing a frog doctor, let's say, then the whole campaign kind of revolves around the Bastion, and it becomes about building up that Bastion. That's how I can see it being really successful.
Very cool.
Well,
mercenary company building up their guild hall.
Sure,
That's what Acquisitions Incorporated is. It's all about building up this business, which is at a location that you find along the way. And when we were designing it, we tried to solve the problem of, well, what happens when you build this place, but now you need to go off far and wide in adventure. It is, you build a mobile Bastion. You put wheels on it. It becomes a blimp. It becomes a teleporting Bastion. So it can move with you. You still keep exactly.
Hey, doesn't Horde of the Dragon Queen end with you getting a flying castle? Spoilers for a 10-year-old adventure.
Sounds like a Bastion to me. I do think it is important, though. Something that Ben said made me think, are we all working with the same definition of what downtime is? Because I realized as you were saying that I was throwing it around, but mine probably means something different, Because for me, downtime is about having those moments that, because I'm always looking for inspiration from TV and film and whatever. And TV and film gives you those moments where characters can debrief about what's happened. And that's what I'm mostly looking for in downtime. I'm looking for the characters to interact with each other. So for me, I'm looking at a Bastion. I'm like, if they get a chapel, I want the opportunity for one of the characters to have a crisis of faith and go and have this scene in the chapel where they, discuss that or whatever. I'm looking for a scene at the ball where they're like having a moment to just relax and have a party. I'm looking for those kinds of things when I'm talking about using a Bastion for downtime. But that might not be what other people are looking for.
Sure.
I also want to suggest, as far as adventures that can support Bastions, the now several anthology adventures that Wizards has out. Tales of the Yawning Portal, Keys of the Golden Vault, Candlekeep Mysteries.
Yeah.
Those are all disconnected. The Bastion system might be connective tissue that kind of brings you back in before you go out again. Right? Waterdeep Dragon Heist was influenced a lot by the TV show Leverage, where they always have they've got a base above a bar or in Boston or something like that. And they'll go out and they'll heist some crapbag CEO and they'll come back and they'll hide and they'll go out and do another thing. And funnily enough, Leverage is very inspired by D&D. The whole group of characters in that ensemble are all basically like D&D classes. So, yeah, I don't know. The more episodic your game is, I feel, and Prince's is very much this way also, I think the more useful the Bastion system becomes. Because Lord of the Rings would not have a very good Bastion system.
No, I mean, that's the campaigns that I've run the majority of my time. Just quickly, the Lairs of Etheris would also work really well if you're building like a Monster Hunters guild, because they're just a bunch of lairs from level 1 to 20, It'd be a very quick campaign because they're largely 1 or 2 shots, but nevertheless, like a 20-week campaign is actually not that quick. But the sort of campaigns that I've run are mostly, Stranger in a Strange Land. Is that what I'm thinking of? Like the Lone Wanderer style, except the Lone Wanderer is a party of people, that are just moving through the world rather than having anywhere to call home, which has made not just having a Bastion difficult, but also downtime difficult because I've never understood it really, Downtime to me is a time skip. It's like, all right, well, it would make sense, to time skip because it's winter now and we need to move the campaign forward or something. But everybody pick a feat. I don't know, is generally how I've done downtime in the past. Speaking of downtime, we might need to have some downtime pretty soon. But I just quickly want to hit this last bit of news. Penguin Random House stops D&D distribution. This was something I almost forgot about over the weekend. So if you don't know the details, Penguin Random House are a very large distribution company for books. in the US, but they've also got a branch here in Australia. Let's assume this news is US-centric for the moment. I'm not sure how it affects overseas distribution. Wizards of the Coast is ending its distribution deal with Penguin Random House effective, I've heard both the 1st of January and the 31st of December at the end of this year being the date, but basically New Year's. And Wizards of the Coast will be using 6 smaller companies to handle distribution, one of which I've heard of before, which is Diamond, which I think do comic books.
Okay.
And there's a concern about how this will affect particularly regional isolated brick and mortar stores, because they, Penguin has a lot of resources that makes getting books to them very, very easy. And there's a concern that this will cause a contraction of the availability of physical D&D rule books and adventures within certain bookseller outlets.
And you and I might have been getting slightly different information because I don't know whether it's just the way that the information was delivered, but what I was reading made it sound like D&D or Wizards already had sort of publishing deals with those 6 other companies, but it's just that it also had Penguin Random House.
Yes.
And now instead of using Penguin Random House, it's going to continue using those 6, but it's going to also use Hasbro's in-house stuff is what it sounded like.
Yes.
And you and I also had different reads on whether or not
it's a
Penguin
big deal.
Random House even gave books to gave books. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whether they supplied game stores or whether they were more for, Barnes and Noble and those kinds of situations.
What I'm hearing is that Penguin Random House would only distribute to some of the larger stores, and Hasbro has ins with those already.
Okay.
So
See,
it's saving Wizards or saving Hasbro money.
This had a
Doesn't
very
seem so big.
sky is falling kind of, air to it, and I wasn't sure how seriously to take that or not. Go ahead, Shawn.
Well, the other thing is that from what I've heard, Random House Penguin also had something to do with electronic distribution of books, and now there's D&D
right.
Beyond. So
Yeah.
they are not needed for that. In fact, it's not wanted at all. So
That
it was
makes
a doomed partnership going forward for that reason. But yeah, it was the typical Wizards did something, let's find a bad spin on it. And step by step by step, every bad spin people could imagine was debunked. Oh, look what they're doing to game stores. Well, Penguin doesn't distribute to game stores. Oh, well, think of this, think of that, and every step along the way. My funny thought was, I think they should have announced that they were signing a partnership with Penguin and see people get all upset about that and then say, oh, just kidding. We're actually cutting off our partnership with them.
With the old switcheroo.
Yeah.
I would
got
love
punked.
I would love to see "just kidding" written into a press release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast. One little tidbit about this to note is, as far as I'm aware from what I've read, this doesn't affect licensed books such as the Heroes Feast books, the Dragon Lore book. I can't remember what it was called, but we talked about it on the Lorecast recently.
The practically complete guide to dragons.
Thank you. So it's more like their rule books, their core books, and their adventure modules. The game itself is what this affects more so than, other types of book sales.
There was, before you cut me off, there was one thing that I wanted to say about the playtest that I forgot. I saw you moving to wrap up.
Oh yeah, I'm getting there. Shawn has to go to bed, Dael. Make this quick.
It's so short. Is that they also talked about cantrips, and the only one that I care about is True Strike, because True Strike was a mess before, and this is their opportunity to fix it. And I think while this version of True Strike works, I think that broadly in terms of what it is intended to do, I think that they're still missing the mark.
I want to say I also care about Blade Ward, which was
it's so
similarly to
strong
True
now.
Strike, useless before and unsimilarly to True Strike, maybe way too strong now.
Well, I want to talk about Friends because my understanding is, and I actually didn't read it, I just had somebody tell me this. We got it in an email. I want to get to this email. It'll have to be next week, but Sasha, I see your email saying that Friends no longer turns characters hostile to you after the spell ends, and it no longer, they don't know they've been charmed anymore. Which, again, I haven't read it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but does that mean you just always have advantage on any sort of charisma check if you are that character who can cast Friends?
Let's make sure we're looking at the document here.
That's a good idea.
Just to be, 100% on this.
They get a saving throw against it, so it's not they're not automatically charmed.
But you can always be trying it.
And they have the charmed condition for the duration.
So it's now charmed person, but in cantrip form?
You can only cast it on the one character once within 24 hours.
That's a pretty good limitation there.
Well, I want to talk about Spare the Dying, which is now actually usable because before you had to actually go up to and touch the person who you're trying to stabilize, which is the same thing you have to do if you have the medicine check to do it. So now you can at least do it from range, and that range increases as you level up. So you could do it from 120 feet away at the highest level.
R.I.P. Grave Cleric.
Yeah, I don't think the Grave Cleric will be part of the quartet of the player's handbook. Am I wrong about that?
No, I don't think so. I think you're right about that.
At
least I haven't heard anything.
It means they bought themselves some time to reimagine the Grave Cleric, perhaps.
I think we're seeing a lot of I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but a lot of those subclass, particularly from Xanathar's and Tasha's, those subclass abilities get moved into either core class abilities or core spell abilities. Like Hunter's Mark got behind a core ability, didn't it, for the Ranger? Yeah.
I really want to say, as long as we're talking about UA, Jeremy made a point on the video about how they're trying to give, every class 4 subclasses, right? And those subclasses should represent the 4 corners of the class, or at very least 2 kind of opposing ideologies for the class, whereas Wizard gets Evoker and Abjurer, right? Offense, defense, and Illusionist, Diviner, Falsehood, Truthhood.
Right.
And he talked about the Clockwork Sorcerer in particular as a counterpoint, a lawful counterpoint to the chaotic wild magic. And I'm really curious to see how those right, because I used to think Clockwork was a bizarre choice. But that made total sense to me. And I want to see, I don't know, I want to see the world building implications of this as this comes down, because it sounds like they're really going to try and talk about this in the books. And every time a new edition rolls around, that's actually the thing that made me feel the most like this has new edition energy to it. Because every time a new edition rolls around, something changes about the classes, and something about the Forgotten Realms has to change to accommodate it, basically.
Sure.
It's like, oh, they're sorcerers now. Oh, tieflings are this now. That sort of thing.
I really want to see these quartets and how they've divided them. That's what I'm hanging out for, because there are massive flavor implications. I want the lore.
Well, it's now a multiverse thanks to Planescape, which is all about law, chaos, good, evil. So we've got those diametrically opposed things. Maybe that's the direction they're moving in.
And Planescape is going to be even more core than ever, which, as a Planescape fan, I'm a fan of.
Well, in that case. Speaking of things slowly dying, this podcast is also slowly dying, like I am inside. For this week, we will be back next week with another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. You can catch us next week, still October, so I believe it is still 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and it will be 10 a.m. Tuesday for Australia. It's Monday night for the other times. I always forget to say the day. Or you can catch us on YouTube, or you can catch us on Spotify. James, did you know, because you've been away for the last 2 weeks, that we are almost at 10 Wait, no, cut.
That was perfect. Dante, keep it. Keep it,
That's
Dante.
all. That's all metric system numbers.
We are almost at 10,000 followers of the Lorecast on both Spotify and YouTube across the two platforms.
Damn, are those Imperial or metric followers?
Those are followers from across all units of measurement. There's a couple of leader followers in there as well. But we're not at 10,000 yet. So if we get to 10,000 before the end of the year, Joey will shave into mutton chops or something. I'm really not sure.
Oh,
anyway,
God, we've gone into red.
my name is Ben Byrne. This has been this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast here with James Hager, Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, and we will be back next week with another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. See you then.
You guys became a rainbow.
We went through every emotion of the rainbow.
I can't do that, Dave.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah, I was just like 10,000 doesn't sound.